Ladies and gentlemen, very happy to have this next guest on our show, returning, having been on a couple times, and always someone that people love watching and listening to. This man is a UFC legend, having won 6 Fight of the Night bonuses, one of the most popular guys in the UFC during his stay there for many years. Now a integral part of the television commentary team for David Feldman's Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship, the BKFC. We're talking about the man they call Lights Out, Chris Lytle. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. Chris, Lights Out Lytle, man. It's always so great to talk to you. I really appreciate you coming on here. We have UFC 245. We are going to be there in person covering it. I'm super excited. And yeah, man, it's going to be fantastic. But I am very, very excited to pick your brain on this, because I know you are a big MMA fan, and having been a big MMA star yourself, you know the ins and outs of what the fighters go through and what it's like leading up to fight week and what the matchups are like. And I mean, you know, everyone can kind of get it, and obviously there may be some journalists that are better at understanding fights than some fighters, but I think having been a high-level fighter and also someone who is a commentator now and a journalist like yourself is really the best of both worlds. So I really value your contribution.
Well, I appreciate it. You know, it's funny to me. Even when I was fighting, you know, you think, okay, I got the inside track on this thing. I understand things. And then so you kind of, you know, predicting fights. And a lot of times you're not as good as you think. You know, sometimes it's amazing. Otherwise, I guess you'd watch me give my predictions and you'd go make, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, it's true. Unfortunately, it falls just short of that. No matter who you are, it's so hard. MMA is such a hard fight. I mean, I really do believe MMA is one of the harder sports to bet on, because so much can happen, man. Someone can, right? Go ahead.
That's true too. But another thing, the hardest part to me is you never know, unless you're trained at that facility or have people who do train at that facility. You don't know what's going on in that fighter's camp. I mean, they might have a great camp and they're hitting on all cylinders, and then, you know, they're in the position to win, but maybe they do get head kicked around. But I mean, you know, some weird submission or something happens. There's always that chance. But I'm saying there's a lot of times, even with the camp, maybe that fighter's not training as hard as they were. Like if you look at that, okay, Joshua versus that Ruiz, you know, that boxing match that just happened. Ruiz comes out afterwards like, yeah, I partied the whole time. I didn't train hard enough. Like, nobody knew that until the fight. You know what I mean? So look at, like, if you were in that camp, you'd have known, man, Ruiz is not ready. I need, you know, if you were predicting, if you were commentating, if you were talking about it, you might bring that up, you know, later on. But, like, I didn't know that going in. So if you were predicting Ruiz to win that fight, you didn't have all the information. Same thing here. If there's a camp going on and, like, things aren't going perfect, you don't know the background. You don't know that fighter's mental state at that time. Some people are always hungry, and some people, they have personal things going on. You just don't know. So even if everything's going perfect, though, if 2 guys have a perfect camp, like you said, there still is that outside camp. Something weird can happen. So there's like 10 different variables you have to worry about when it comes to how the fight's going to lay out. And you can, as a analyst or a fight predictor or a fighter, you can only probably see 3 or 4 of those. So there's several unknown X factors you just don't know.
Absolutely. Very well stated. Very well stated. Well, let's jump on in it. I was wanting to go from the early prelims to the top, but unfortunately, I don't know if Adam can hear me. We have our executive producer here only, and he queued it up on the screen and then had to step out to handle something here. So what we're going to do then is we're going to start at the top, because those are the fights that I remember right now. And if Adam can get back here as soon as you can, so we can get the screen going, so I can see the early prelims and the prelims, that would be fabulous. Anyway, okay. All right, Chris. Okay. So let's start out, any of the, well, obviously the main event is Colby and Kamaru Usman. So this was your division.
Yes.
This is the welterweight division you know well. So there's so many questions here. Let me fire a couple away at you. Is there, both of them are big men. I think that may be Adam, and if that is, we might be able to get him to help on the screen. Adam, if you're there. Anyway, so let's, okay, forget it. All right, so are either of these fighters bigger for the weight class? They both seem to be very big guys. I don't think either of them has a size advantage. I think they're both big welterweights as far as I know. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think if anyone would be the bigger fighter, I would think it'd be. I'm not real. I'm sure they're both pretty big, but I think a little bit of size and strength factor might go to him.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that he could even be a middleweight, and not that Colby's not big, but I think he's about an inch and a half taller and maybe a little bit thicker, a little bit
Exactly.
heavier. Yeah, both big guys. Okay, so what I'm hearing a lot of people say is it's essentially the same guy fighting himself as far as the skill set. You have Usman, who is a really great wrestler. He was a D2 national champion.
Yeah.
Colby was a D1 All-American. Their MMA wrestling is both dominating. They're both not great with their hands, but they're pretty good. They're both smart fighters, have slightly different styles. The pace is a little bit different. But what can you tell me, knowing the welterweight division, knowing the movement that you've seen out of both of these men, where do some of the advantages lie in your mind, if any? And just
Sure.
give me a breakdown, yeah, on what
I,
are we
I
looking
mean,
at here?
this fight all comes down to one thing. I mean, the one where place that Covington has the advantage is his output. He has a very, very, very high output for that weight. He's constantly moving, constantly throwing punches. Now he's not throwing too many punches with too bad intention. He's just looking to touch you, beat you up, and rough you up the whole time. Opposite for his opponent. Usman is going to try and beat him up, and if he can be the bigger, stronger guy and not be worn down by the continuous attack coming from Covington, I think that's what the fight's all about. If Usman's going to get tired from Covington coming at him the whole time, and um, if Covington gets stifled and like held for a while, I think he loses. I think he has a pretty decent chance, but just that pace he puts on is so relentless. If he continue to work at his pace, he will win. If he gets stopped from that pace of continuing to put out output, he'll lose. So it's all about how that pace happens. If Covington can continue to do like normal and keep hitting punches and constantly becoming forward pressure, even if he's not hitting you hard the whole time, or even if he's not taking you down, constantly putting pressure on you, he will wear you down. He'll win the fight. If that doesn't happen, if he's stifled in any way, he'll lose the fight. That's what that fight's all about to me. I think we'll figure that out in the first round.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
I mean,
It's
look at Covington. He just wears people out with consistent, tenacious pressure. You know that's his game plan. That's all he really does, in my opinion. Not he ain't gonna hit you hard. He ain't gonna submit you much. I mean, he's just gonna come at you like a gnat, just consistently wear you down and kind of beat you up.
makes sense. Do you think that either of them are going to have the advantage in the wrestling, or that's going to kind of cancel out?
I
Both.
personally think it'll negate each other, and so if somebody does get something like a takedown or one of the other guys should be able to probably pop back up pretty soon. I don't see anybody having a dominant wrestling factor in it. Once again, it's going to be the same thing, like isometric flex of stopping the takedown from happening, or just a consistent shot after shot after shot. Hard to tell exactly which way it's going to play out, but those are the two different methods you're going to have right
Makes sense. And then the output from Covington, the gas tank is going to be a question if anyone gasses. I'm sure they're both really aware of that.
there. Mm-hmm.
It's going to be really interesting. Doctor, yeah, right over there. There was a contribution made. Yep. Anyway, so yeah, sorry, I was a little distracted. We had a little bit of an error message I was seeing on the boards, but our producer is
Okay.
back, and the doors hopefully closed. And okay, so yeah, I think that's a good analysis. I really do. So coming down to it, what is your thought? What are a couple of different ways that you see this fight unfolding with what you just broke down, and then a prediction if you have one?
Okay, I think Covington obviously he's going to continue to try and really be first and push the pace and um, go after him. I think as like like you say, he'll tell in the first round if he's able to keep moving the whole time. If he's getting stifled right away or stopped, or his shots are getting stopped, and he's just having to carry the weight the whole time, I think eventually he fades. If not, if he's able to be effective aggressively, I think he'll really start to take over third, fourth, and fifth round and win. Like I said, conversely, if Usman's able to just kind of be bigger and stronger and stifle all the takedowns, I think it's kind of the same thing. I think he might stop him in the last couple rounds. If I had to predict, this is really tough this one. I really don't know. I'm probably gonna say
Major.
I might go with an upset and say Covington's gonna wear him down and kind of just do enough to win the fight in the last few rounds. But that's a very close, razor thin, maybe 52% chance of that happening. But I wouldn't be surprised to see him lose at all.
Makes sense, but you do think more than likely it'll go the distance with a small chance of a stoppage by Usman.
Correct.
Makes sense, and the fact that Covington's slight underdog is merited, you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I would, like I said, it
Pretty
could go either way. I wouldn't be surprised if. I think it should be a close.
Yeah, 52%. You did say 52%, so that's about as even as you can get.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I appreciate it, Chris. Okay. Yeah, it's so tough too. I'm leaning toward Usman, but man, both of these guys are so competitive. Let me ask you this: when you have two really good wrestlers that don't really have tremendous amount of striking, sometimes you end up having a snoozer of a fight. But am I correct in assuming that since both of these guys are in their prime, since there's so much at stake, and both guys have not been shown to be terrible strikers, would you think that I'm correctly assuming that there really isn't too much of a chance of this being a snoozer, or do you think there's a decent chance that this might be a snoozer?
I don't think there's a great chance of it just based on one thing, based on Covington like output. Like I said, he's usually so active and so moving around that that's going to create holes and openings, and that usually makes for at least an entertaining fight. You just don't want guys out there moving and not engaged, like tying up and holding them. And I don't see that being the case. So if that's not the case, I think it should be pretty entertaining.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, I saw one young guy who does breakdowns on the internet that's seeming to be pretty insightful, but he made a weird comment. He said that he's frustrated that Mark Goddard was given the assignment for this fight because Goddard warned Usman against inactivity or took him out of positive position or something. You know, I mean, sometimes when I see someone say this, that's not, you know, not that I'm embracing it, not that I'm a hater for anyone young, but I feel like saying if you're going to rip on Mark Goddard for not knowing what he's doing refereeing, you might as well have ripped on, you know, Michael Jordan for not knowing how to play basketball. You know, I mean, Mark Goddard, I think, is about as experienced as Big John McCarthy and one of the more experienced good referees out there. Wouldn't you agree?
Very good. I mean, here's the thing. A good referee, they know when people are working and when they're not. I mean, you know, it's like that's a better referee. Like a not as good referee, you know, might be full. The guy might be like as a fighter, you do stuff sometimes, and we've been telling you be active, do this to make just so they don't stand you up or so they don't you're in a dominant position, so they don't pull you out of it. But experienced referee knows, hey, you're just doing this so I don't break it. Don't do that anymore. I know what you're doing. So he might be a level ahead of that other referee who you're fooling.
Yeah.
He's not being fooled. He knows what you're doing. You're just stalling position because you're winning, and he wants action because the fans want action. So that's a level of a better referee, in my opinion.
Yep, I agree. All right, next fight up, we are going to go to the co-main, which is Max Holloway, the blessed one, against Alexander Volkanovski. A rare example of a big height difference at this weight class. At heavyweight or light heavyweight, even a middleweight, sometimes you see a 5-inch or 4.5-inch height difference, but you rarely see a 5-inch or 4.5-inch height difference at featherweight. But that's what you're getting here. I think you have a 5'11" Max Holloway against a 5'6.5" or 5'6" Alexander Volkanovski. Volkanovski, though, is like a little Tasmanian devil. He's been killing it. They both hold wins over Jose Aldo. Holloway holding 2 wins over Aldo. Man, I'd love to hear your breakdown on that. And also tell me how much you think height is going to be a factor. Height doesn't mean everything. I know some people and a lot of girls I know that think that if a guy's 6'5" and he's fighting a guy 5'11", that the guy 6'5" is going to win every time because he's so tall. The reality is that's not the truth. This guy, depending on who the 5'11" guy is, he could be the 6' guy every time. But give me a breakdown on this fight and tell me how at 145 that height might be a factor and why.
Well, obviously, watching Max Holloway fight many times, especially back at 145, which I'm glad to see. You know, he does use his height for well, not really his height, but his length. He's got long. He likes to keep people at the end of those punches. He's quick enough. He's fast enough where, you know, he wins a lot of those exchanges because he determines when they're going to be had, you know, because he's on the outside. He can come in and stand for a second, but he's not going to sit in front of you and fall in love and just keep landing punches because that's when the guy with the shoulder arms can retaliate. So he just wants to get in, get his punches and move out and be quick in the punch and very accurate. That's what he has going for him. He's very accurate with his punching. So I think he'll be much better at 145 than when we watch him at 155, in my opinion. So now the difference is Alexander can close that distance fast. He's a little shorter. He has to explode in to make the fight happen. The problem with that technique, which works great, unless you're, I mean, that's usually better for when you're going with heavier guys. You have to work your way in quickly. You have that explosive burst in to get in to land your punches. The problem is you're bursting in against a guy like Max Holloway with really good, accurate hands. So he's going to be able to probably hit and counter, in my opinion, and not be there for the return fire from Alexander. Alexander's going to try and come in and get this. You know, he's got to close that distance. Usually you get inside, you get your punches off. But I think every time he gets inside to land those punches, he's going to be eating one at the same time. So it's not going to be able I'm going to work my way in, land 3 punches, and stay inside. I think as he's working his way in, he's going to eat one. And then when it's his turn to deliver one, he's still going to eat another one. So I think Max is going to be smart enough to move out of the way, cut those angles, and work his way, either stop him late or just win the decision.
Makes sense. Do you think the fact that Holloway has been in fact, here's a question I really like your answer on. You had a good long career, but you didn't overstay your welcome like a lot of fighters. Your MMA career was what, 12 years, 13?
13.
Yeah. And there were some fights that you won easily. There were some fights that you won where you were so slick you didn't take too much damage, but you also had some wars as well. It wasn't a situation, right, like Chuck Liddell, you were getting knocked out all the time, or you really weren't getting beaten that badly or smashed or annihilated ever, but you had some wars. Those do accumulate, and can you look at a matchup like this and say Max Holloway has had a bunch, not a bunch, but several wars, and Volkanovski really hasn't. He's kind of pretty much come out the better in every fight he's had. Now, level of competition is part of the reason, but is there, at some point, even though Max is still in his 20s, can that add up a little bit, just the accumulation of damage? And I mean, could it be possible that just being the younger, fresher fighter with less damage, that Volkanovski might be in a situation where he could take advantage of that and that can mean something? Or do you think as long as the guy's in his 20s here like Max and it hasn't been an ungodly amount of damage, that probably won't be relevant here?
Well, I'm a believer in it's not necessarily the years, it's the mileage, like on a car. If you have a car with 300,000 miles and it's only 8 years old, it's still, it's rough. I mean, it's the same thing with a fighter. If you have a fighter who's been fighting since they were 15 and they're 29 and they've been in wars, I mean, anybody who's been in wars, it can take its toll on you. You know, I always was told as a fighter, you have like a button, you know, when it gets hit, you're going to get knocked out. You know, fortunately, I was never able to get hit that button, but as people start getting knocked out, that button gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you get hit here and you get knocked. You know what I mean? So we don't know. You never really know a lot of times. Sometimes you watch a fight and you go, that fighter got old. And you don't know until that fight. You know what I mean? And afterwards, they're never going to be young again. It's never going to be the same fighter. But, you know, until they're old, I mean, until they're like old, quote unquote, as a fighter, you're not really going to know. I don't think Holloway has taken that kind of damage and he's gotten that old where that's going to happen in this fight. I could be surprised though. I could watch and be like, yep, it happened. I don't think so right now because once again, that usually happens to fighters when they're at least in their 30s.
Yeah, makes sense.
They've had odds, even if they've been fighting for a long time. It usually comes right around. I mean, like I said, I didn't have, even though I fought a lot of wars, like you said, I was able to continue fighting until right about the time I turned 37.
Yep. And
I never had anything where I did, like, hell, I even had a couple of bare knuckle fights this last year, you know, and I still feel fine. But that's because I haven't been taking damage, you know.
Right.
I'm older now, but, you know, I don't really take any damage. And I even training now, I try and be smart about things. But I'm not doing that anymore. But, you know, you just really never know. Could Max Holloway get old in this fight? It's conceivable. Do I see it happening? No.
Yeah.
If I thought I would predict him to lose, but I think he'll win.
Understood. I'm leaning toward that as well. Although, man, this, if Volkanovski wins, man, then this is gonna raise his stock, and his potential will be have doubled or tripled to what people thought it was before, and before people were impressed with him as I was. So yeah, we'll see. It should be exciting. I think it'll be an exciting fight. But yeah, he's gonna have to be even better than most of us thought he was to beat Holloway. Probably.
You know what? I predict for him this will be one of those fights for him where he'll lose, but it'll just make him that much better. And in 2 years he'll be down. You know what I mean? I think 2 years it'll be his time. I think his time has not quite come yet, and this will be a stepping stone. I think he will be there at some point. But
yeah, like a future champion, and this could be something that helps make him get even closer to that.
Exactly.
Excellent. Appreciate that. Next up, the ladies, the champ, Amanda Nunes. And the Lioness has the former featherweight champion on her hands, and they're fighting for the bantamweight belt. This is something I do think is kind of ironic. The Amanda has both the bantamweight and featherweight women's belt, and she's defending her bantamweight belt against the former featherweight champion, who she didn't take the title off of. But it's a whole convoluted, muddled situation there. How what do you call her, vacated it. Anyway, this is an interesting fight here. One of the things I said is that wouldn't it be interesting if the challenger, Germaine de Randamie, wins and immediately Amanda says, next fight is at 45, we're fighting again. And if the UFC were to say done deal, and a couple weeks later that's signed, that would be one of the more rare, unusual circumstances where a champion defends her title, loses it, and then fights for a second title that she held against the same opponent. I think that would be a historic thing. I don't think that's ever happened, but nevertheless, how does that fight unfold, man? I think this is one of the more dangerous strikers for sure, and possibly overall fighters that Amanda's gone against. Amanda usually being the better striker. She's gone up against a woman who's 8-time Muay Thai champion, and on top of that, de Randamie's been training for a while over at AKA with a bunch of killer grapplers, and that'll be interesting to see how she employs it. What's the Chris Lytle Lights Out breakdown on this fight?
I've been overly impressed, I think, with Amanda Nunes and her ability to just, she just has like a different gear, in my opinion. She's not quite as technical, as her opponent, but I just feel like the way that she fights, I think she's got a little bit more of an X factor where she can just, I don't care how tight she is, and I don't care how your movement is, or whatever. She just seems to find a way to land the big punches at the right time, in my opinion. I think that's what she's going to do in this one. I think she's going to outstrike. I think most of the fight, obviously, will be on the feet. I think she's going to outstrike her and win the fight. That's been my thought. I mean, like I said, technically, is she a better fighter? No, but that doesn't matter. Sometimes you go in the gym and there's somebody who's real technical good, and somebody's just awkward enough, and they have their own style, and that works. And I think that's kind of her. She hits very, very, very hard and does well. I think she's going to just find a way to win.
I like that, and I think you meant that technically, not that Amanda's not the better fighter, but technically she's not the better striker. I think you meant, and yeah. But so how does that work out? Explain that to us a little bit, because a lot of people would say if Germaine was the 8-time Muay Thai champion and Amanda was a 0-time Muay Thai champion, how if they're standing in the center of the cage banging, how Amanda, the MMA fighter, is going to win? Is it just the power, or is it a combination of the power and her chin and her confidence, and that she could just stay in the pocket all night with Germaine? Or is it maybe those things combined with the fact that she's going to throw in some dirty boxing and grind her against the cage a little bit and maybe threaten with the takedowns? How is it, in your opinion, that Amanda is going to use her normal game of striking to beat a woman who on paper she wouldn't want to stand in the pocket with all night?
Well, like you said, she's a 8-time world champion. But this isn't boxing. This isn't kickboxing. This isn't Muay Thai.
Right.
It's MMA. So even when you have boxers who come in and do some form of mixed martial arts or whatnot, it's like, this isn't boxing. Even if the fight's on their feet the whole time, this isn't boxing. It's a little different. One thing I've learned from doing the bare knuckle, even when some of the boxers get involved, They struggle. That distancing is different. The being able to grab, and hold the head and hit is different. The roughing them up is a little bit different. Like I said, that's where the technical boxer, he knows how to do this and that. But when you grab him and start pushing him around like, hey, whoa, 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 what's going on here? It's just a little bit different. Another thing I notice when I'm boxing, and you got some MMA guys or Muay Thai, all these different, kinds of fighting. A boxer's used to seeing a boxer punch. A kickboxer's used to seeing kickboxing things. When things come from different angles and different ways that you're not used to, that's what I'm talking about, being a technical striker versus like a technical brawler. If you're having punches from weird angles and different movements, you're used to every kind of movement a boxer does. You're used to most boxing, kickboxing styles. You're not used to like a different style that you're not used to. So, if you beat, 22 other people who do a certain style and you go to a different style, you can throw a lot of those out the window. It helps a little bit, but you can get beat by somebody who's doing something you're not used to. I know we've had a couple of boxers here who, 9-1, 10-1, like who beat an MMA guy who beat him in boxing. Like, how'd that happen? It's just a different style, a different way of fighting. And that's what I think Amanda Nunes has, is a different style, not necessarily quote unquote technically better at that a striking discipline, but to me, what's technically better is what's working, and what she does tends to work more, in my opinion.
Makes sense. We've got about 8 or 9 more minutes, and I want to break down about 6 or 7 more fights with you. So maybe appreciate it. Maybe give me about a minute on each here. So Adam, I think we got to go up one more, I think, or maybe not. Is that the 4th fight there? I think it is. Okay. This one is an interesting one. Maybe give me a minute and a half on this, and I'm going to let you take up most of the time on this, and then the rest of them maybe 45 seconds each. So Marlon Moraes, who was nearly the bantamweight champion, winning the first round against Henry Cejudo, but then being caught with that amazing comeback and domination by the triple champ, as Henry calls himself. Marlon Moraes is still an absolutely elite athlete, an amazing striker, Brazilian contender, and he is going up. There we go. I saw it. He is going up against Jose Aldo Jr. Aldo has been at 145 his whole career. Every time we've heard for the last couple of years, they've said the weight cut is hard. He should go to lightweight. He should go to lightweight. He's going to lightweight. He's talking about it. This featherweight sucks for him. Blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden, he's at bantamweight. So one of the fans asked here, Joel, is he going to even be able to make this weight? I've heard some reports that he's looking okay. Some reports that he's looking really flat and doesn't look that good. The bottom line is this: the fight on the scale for Jose Aldo is a big one here, going to bantamweight for the first time. And for the very first time to go to bantamweight, you're fighting an absolute killer. A man who is ranked #1 in the world for your first, I don't know, to me, it almost seems like this is a passing the torch fight set up for Aldo to be given his walking papers, if not literally from the UFC, then at least from being considered to be in top contention. Can Jose make this? Can Jose make this weight? And how do you see this fight unfolding in about a minute?
Well, I do think he can make the weight, but the problem is, a weight for the first time you've never made, you don't fight well. I've never seen a person drop down and fight well that time. Usually, if you're in my gym and you're going to make that weight, you have to make it a month before, and then, just so your body gets used. The second time you make it, it's a little better. The third time, it's a little bit better. So I think he can make the weight. I don't think he looks well that way. And going down, you're going to be fighting faster guys. Yeah. That's been one of the things. He's faster. He's not going to be the faster guy now. I think he's slowed down a little bit. I think he's having trouble pulling the trigger a little bit. All these things happen when you fought for many, many years. And I think, the more a guy has trouble pulling that trigger, especially going down in weight class, it's going to be a big problem for him. I do not know why he would want to accept this fight there. I think it's a terrible fight for him. I don't think he's going to win the fight.
Yeah, some fans might say, well, they're both Brazilian, and I'm sure Moraes looked up to Aldo growing up, even though he's not that much younger than him, but Jose's been in the UFC far longer. I think when it comes down to it, Moraes probably says to himself, you know what, I love this guy. If I wasn't fighting for him, I'd cheer for him. He's my countryman, but this is how I support my family. I've got to dispatch this guy like he was anyone else. Right?
Exactly, and that's how he's going to make his mark. If he beats him, that's a huge feather in his cap, and people look at him different, so he's got to do it.
Yeah, makes sense. Next up, Uriah Faber, 40 years old, almost 41, fighting at bantamweight. He pulled it off against a very tough Ricky Simone. Possibly Simone may not have realized how much Faber had left. They're putting him up against a real beast, a bigger, taller, longer, much younger fighter in Petr Yan from Russia. Love to see Faber do it. I know Faber was fighting back when you were, and right in the UFC. Can he do it? Can Faber beat this beast here? Petr Yan, how does that fight unfold? And then a prediction if you have it.
You know, I think he can beat him, but you know what? I mean, man, there's not too many of the people especially from my era, who come back and look very good.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it depends on their opponent, I think. But, you know, I think that was a bad thing. He went in there last time, and like you said, the person underestimated him. I think everybody did, because once again, I've said that before by many people, they're not coming back and doing well. Well, he still has more in the tank than we thought. He didn't go out and get knocked out a bunch. He's still fine. However, that being said, when you have a 40-year-old guy coming in, you're going against one of these young lions. Those guys have been training since they were 12. And now, not only are they older and mature, they're like in their physical prime, you know, and they've been training for a long time. So, you know, you might be able to get by with some guys, but I think it's going to be very tough for him to beat. Yeah, I really do.
Are there any tricks? I mean, are there any veteran tricks that he can use here, or is that just tricks like in big-time wrestling scripted matchups? Or is there some veteran tricks that Faber could use here?
Only thing that I can think of as far as tricks is just, you know, experience, as far as not getting rattled out there, you know, being relaxed the whole time. But I mean, that's not really a trick. I mean, you have veteran knowledge of how to pace yourself and how to not get tired, and you do have some of these things like that and how to deal with big pressure fights. That'll help. But when you're going in there with a guy who's young and hungry, and they are really mentally focused, and they don't let that stuff get to them, boy, it's gonna be tough.
Yeah.
And that's what I think about Jan. I'm like, man, you're going against a hungry, tough guy, and that's going to be a tough fight. I'd love to try to win, though. But I mean, I think it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I hear you. I'd love to see Faber win, too. It doesn't seem likely, but I'd love to see it. It'd be great if he won, if he could walk away, but it almost never seems to be that way. If you win, then he says, wait a second, maybe I can be the new champion. You know, so probably it. All right, next up, let me see here. We got about 4 minutes left. Let's see. Can we go? Okay, here we go. Yeah, okay, Jeff Neal against Mike Perry, and then we'll do one more. Jeff Neal is a great fighter, really nice guy. We've had on the show a couple times from a great team in Dallas. I'm not sure if they're on your radar. Fortis MMA has a bunch of killers on there. Jeff Neal's been killing it. Beat Nico Price. He's beaten several really good fighters. He's the favorite here against the man they call Platinum Mike Perry from my hometown of Detroit. I'm almost always for the Detroiters here, but I've gotten to know Jeff a bit here through our show a few times, and I'm thinking he does it. I think he's the younger, fresher man. And Perry's been in some wars, but Perry's a beast, and I don't know. Give me a breakdown on this one for maybe 45 seconds.
Yeah, you know, Perry, like you said, he's a beast, hard hitter, pretty good. Obviously, just a tough, grimy guy. You know, he's going to be in there at all times. He's never going to be in an easy fight, but once again, he's won some, he's lost some. I don't think he's quite. I don't think he's going to have this fight to be able to go out there and win. Like I said, the guys from Denver got some really good stuff going on right there. Nico Price is a very big, strong, athletic competitor. Having a win of him is very good. I think it's kind of his time. Like I said, Platinum Mike right now, you know, he's about 500 in my opinion. His last, 6 fights. I mean, maybe a little bit better than that, but I think he's winning some, he's losing some. I think this is a bad matchup for him. I don't think he's going to be able to pull it off.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you meant the guys from Dallas at Fortis MMA. Jeff Neal, yeah, a definite beast. And let me see, scroll down a little bit, Adam. Let me see what else. Okay, here we go. These are two guys that also fought when you were in the UFC. This really, I think, is, they used to call in wrestling, unfortunately, a loser go home fight. And I think the loser loses his contract. Also, although depending who the loser is, probably his camp, and he will call it a career. But we have Matt the Immortal Brown. Did you ever fight Matt Brown?
Fought Matt twice.
You did. Love it. Matt the Immortal Brown and Ben Saunders. I don't think you ever fought Ben, right?
No, but I do like Ben. He's a really good guy, man.
Yeah.
I like guys actually. And like you said, these are the kind of fights I like because they're my throwback guys from my era.
Yes.
And respect both these guys a lot. unfortunately, like you said, Father Time's undefeated when it comes to fighting. So I'm glad these two are fighting each other. So I mean, it'll be a good nostalgic fight. It all depends on who has the most left. In my opinion, Matt Brown's been for the last several years. He's been one of my favorite guys to watch. So I think I'm going to be pulling for him as far as who I think is going to win because the dude's he's a killer the way he fights, the way he trains, everything. But it's like you said, loser does need to quit. Maybe both guys might need to quit. Depends on how the fight looks. If they go out there and look flat or don't look good, yeah, I want both guys to quit because I like both those guys. And my prediction is Matt Brown has just that killer attitude and he can come in and hit a little bit harder and kind of finish it on his feet. I think it's probably what's going to happen.
I think you're right, and I got Matt Brown on that. I think it's going to be a tough fight, both great veterans. Well, in the final 30 seconds, Chris, and I want to thank you so much for jumping in. Bare Knuckles Fighting Championship on pay-per-view. It's always a reasonable price, $20-25. Can you tell us really quick if there's a next event scheduled yet?
Yeah, I think they just changed the day. I think it's February 15th now. It's going to be down in Miami, Florida. So I can't wait. February in Indiana is not the best. So Miami is the best. So yes. Anybody wants to make it down there, I promise, man, those fights are awesome. They're fun to be at. They're fun to commentate. They're fun to watch. They're turning into my favorite thing to watch because they're always action-packed and a lot of fun. So BKFC 10 down in Miami. Come check it out. Maybe I'll hang out with you, drink a beer with you. It'll be fun.
Absolutely. Really appreciate it, Chris. And thank you so much, man, for jumping on here and doing this breakdown. You're always on point, and the insight is always absolutely something for even a longtime fan and martial artist myself to learn from. So really appreciate you.